Father God, we just ask you to be with us this evening, and we ask for your protective canopy over Eric and Jamie as they travel to Jerusalem. We ask your anointing upon this evening's discussions and prayer, Lord, that we would listen to your voice, Father. In your name, amen.
Could have been one note, one pitch higher, but nevertheless. So today is SHIN, and even though we finally got some good bold whiteboard markers, because nobody can apparently see what I write on the board if you're watching on the internet or on the DVDs, we can't use them because we brought a blackboard. So we'll see if we can write on there and make things easier to see. So this is the letter SHIN. The word SHIN means teeth. And again, if you have the red dictionary, that's SHIN. Well, I'll write stuff on there in a minute. But the SHIN has two different sounds. One is an S, and the other one is an SH. It's the same letter, and in the modern Hebrew, it has a dot above it, either to the right hand or to the left. So whether it's the word sin or shin, or seen or sheen, I guess it's just kind of a grammatical difference, but it's the same exact letter. And what the letter basically means is teeth. So here, you might say on this shirt here, is these teeth. And there's this concept of, I'm sure people have heard, out of the frying pan into the fire. So as if the teeth weren't enough, the other concept of teeth is once you get past the teeth, you still got the fire to deal with. SHIN is also fire, because it's that which consumes. And so whether it's the fangs or the flames, we have to face what's ultimately in the destiny of the earth, the cosmos, what we're facing. So the thing about this picture here, as we discussed in previous weeks, these are kind of graphic symbols extracted from the first 5 chapters of the book of Revelation. And that has to do with that which is coming ultimately. The letter, which means after this, or this is what's following, or when this phase is done, the next thing, and it's also the long reach, is the letter QOOF. So according to the Mishkan pattern, we've got Alef through Hey being the plan, you might say, from the eternal intentions side of things. So according to the color codes, that's why this is in white. And then you've got the boundaries of the black, the dark here, meaning to say, okay, this is... Years ago, a guy wrote a book called This Present Darkness. Frank Peretti, I believe it, wasn't it? And so within this world sphere, there's this notion that we don't really see everything that's going on. There's theories, there's beliefs, there's doctrines, but we really don't know what's going on. We hope we're right, we can claim we're right, but we really don't see clearly. So this zone within the dark confines, that's what that represents. And on the other side of the dark confines, it's in the white again. So the point is, the letters Alef through Hey are the Almighty's intention, saying, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what it's all about. And then, so at the letter Vav, which is the connector, that which you might say also represents the man, or here's the man who Zion, the Vav Zion, the man slain, or here's man's troubles in this world. The last letter, QOOF, is also in the dark. And so the reason for that is because the QOOF represents, remember it's the QOOF has a vertical aspect and then an encircling aspect. So remember, it had to do with like the binary code of a 1 and a 0. It's kind of the mushroom shape. It's also the singular, the plural. It's like one person standing in front of an audience of a whole bunch of different people. Like kind of like a picture of Yeshua standing in front of the court trying him. Or it's a picture of one and their army. It's not necessarily antagonistic, it's just these concepts embedded within this picture. But it's also this volume coming back down to the earth. So here's a picture of, in the book of Revelation, where actually in the Gospels, at the very end, Yeshua ascended. So he was standing here, and he went up off the temporal earthly plane to, comparatively, the eternal plane, the eternal realm. So here the earthly is kind of like the singular dimensional going up into the multiple dimensional. And so the picture of him coming back is the inverse, coming from, it talks about coming with the hosts of heaven, gathering up his zavot, his armies, and coming back. So that's the inverse of the letter QOOF. So the ascension from this realm into that realm, and then coming back is the eternal realm coming back to the earth realm. So this QOOF is the transition letter. Being this, it's also a pillar, a picture of a pillar, so you could dig a hole, that's the round aspect, a certain amount deep, that's the vertical aspect. So you've got these two ideas in the QOOF, the circular and the linear. So in the sense of saying, if this is both this realm coming back here, or from this realm going back there, the QOOF is a transitional letter. That's why it's in the black here, meaning after this, everything after the QOOF, which is Resh, Shin, Tav, is after this, which is after the transition, meaning it's of the eternal perspective. Just like Alef through Hey was the eternal one's perspective. Resh, Shin, Tav is the eternal one's perspective. And then what's then, you might say, the earthly perspective is between the Vav and the QOOF. The Vav is a nail. It's like, as we discussed, it's a nail or a hook. Well, what does a nail do? It attaches one thing to another. What is a bridge? A bridge attaches this side of the bank to that side of the bank of a river, say. So a bridge is that which connects. So it's a transitional reference also. So that's why the Vav starts the darkness and the QOOF ends the darkness back into the other eternal. But in between, Yeshua made a point. He said, behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So even though we're within this realm of darkness between the Vav and the QOOF, you could say we have been given access to the eternal business, the perspectives, the considerations, which are, as it were, heaven on earth. So in the Lord's Prayer, it's, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If his will is being done, then the stuff that comes of doing his will is also going to be done. So therefore, the regard of these matters within the earth realm is what gives light within the darkness, which is why the letter Het, being the big white fence, backlit by his presence, the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, which would have been the QOOF. So you got the Het and the QOOF, right? The big white fence, the Het. When the Almighty's presence was there and you have the glowing pillar of fire, it would be like the big white fence is like a lampshade glowing in the darkness of the wilderness. So what you have is everything within the Het covered by the QOOF is like this treasure box of his stuff, the heavenly matters which bring light in the darkness. So that's why everything between the Het and the QOOF is written as this white space within the dark space. Let me give one other explanation what I'm talking about here. I'm describing something which isn't here. This is the version of this chart which was made and reproduced. Previously, you know the little bookmarks, for lack of a better description, that are, I think we have some back there. Actually, does somebody want to grab me one, please, and I'll make reference to it. The bookmark was made first. I made that thing back in like 2005, I believe, 2006. Anyway, I left this blank space on this chart so people could write in their own notes. And what I realized is that there was nothing better to put there other than the reference of this other chart. So I have the program that on software which has this whole chart with this other thing here, but it's not here. So it looks like a big blank space. Like I said, I thought I was, giving people space to, in a marginal space to write their own things in. One of these days, when we get another version of this, it will have this and plus these two spiral wheels. Thank you very much. Huh? Oh, okay, great, thanks. So the idea here, when I'm describing, see it fits right in there? The idea is that the white, the darkness, with the white inside the darkness, and then the white again outside here. And I was going to get some more of these printed up. But this is what this came out of. And I thought by having this as a separate thing, but it's lost without it. So if anybody has one of these and wants to get one of these, that would be available. And the colors here is what determined the colors here, because those colors are all keyed to the colors of these letters, though on this chart you don't see that anywhere. You don't see that the colors are actually, what you see is the columns of color. But in this here, it actually has the letters in color. So the point is, Resh Shin Tav is its own little collective. And if you looked at that chart that I gave out a couple weeks ago, it had arrow this way and arrow that way, and had all the letters, and so you could read the letters in their natural sequence, remember? The idea was that letters in their natural chronological sequence mean something. So, for example, if you want to look up Resh Shin Tav, the fact that these letters, natural alphabetic sequence, Resh Shin Tav, happens to be the last three after the QOOF, what does Resh Shin Tav mean? Well, you look at page 631 in the Red Dictionary, and it says, net, snare, trap, network. It's basically like a web. So you could say, well, wait a minute, these days we got the internet and the World Wide Web. Does that have something to do with that? That's just conjecture. But it also says netter, net-like, reticular, kind of like the retina. In fact, it even says retina is Resh Shin Tav. You could say, well, what does that got to do with anything? Well, a net is something that you capture something with. A net, a snare, a trap. You gather your stuff up. And so when you read these words, part of doing this study is not just to read the words in the dictionary, but to apply your thinking and say, well, what is this really trying to say? So you look at the letter QOOF, and you'll also see a sickle sort of a shape for harvesting. In fact, the modern letter QOOF looks pretty much like that. The paleo letter, you could see a sickle. So you look at the last four letters, and it says, okay, after this, which is to say later on, at the end of these matters, the end of the message given to us earth folks, right? Because the Alef Bet is a message that the Almighty gave to the people of the earth. Alef through Hey says, Alef means a prefix of I will. Hey is to reveal or to make manifest. So what he's going to make manifest is in the letters Alef through Hey, the first five letters. And then here it is, this Mishkan pattern. And then he says, after this is a big trap, a snare, a net of the harvest day. And Yeshua talked about he'll gather the wicked into one pile, gather the righteous into another. They'll be thrown the wicked into the fire. The SHIN. The SHIN is Resh, the Resh man, the exalted man, coming back on the harvest day and he's going to throw the wicked into the fire, where there will be gnashing of teeth and wailing. But the righteous will be taken into the place that is prepared for them. And he'll say, well done, good and faithful servant. Question is, what do we have to do to get that sentence spoke to us individually? That's another part of the story. I'm gonna focus in on SHIN a little bit more specifically for the moment. But to engage this picture a bit, so here you have Tav is the sign at the end. So this is what happens at the end. And again, you have this QOOF shape. The sword, the golden circle. Hopefully we'll get to the book of Revelation here towards the second half, but John sees, or Yochanan sees this one, and he has a gold band around his chest. It's like, is that like some kind of a belt, or is that some kind of a sash, or we don't know. It's a description. But if you look at the different things that are described there in the book of Revelation, you'll see all these different things, and it has to do with, you might say, that last great day that we all have anticipation for. So, going back to the Mishkan pattern, there's two ways to regard anticipation. One is enthusiastically saying, oh boy, and the other one is with dread saying, oh no. So just for what it's worth, on the Tav here, you have two kind of motifs that are drawn. One guy jumping enthusiastically, and it's kind of drawn in the X pattern with a guy kind of like the same skull and crossbones motif as the skull and crossbones down below, which basically says, you're dead. When you get to that point, if you're harvested and lumped together in with the people who are going to be thrown into the fire with the gnashing of teeth, it's basically looking at it and going, I just blew an incredible opportunity. Life on the face of the earth, you could say, well, what is it? It's just this experience. But what's it for? If we just say, well, just to say, earth, been there, done that. That plays into something else we're going to talk about earlier, but that's a setup of a joke. The punchline of a joke. But you might say, well, what are we doing this for? Why does this even exist? The answer is in the alphabet. Why does this exist? You go back to Alef through Hey. I'm going to reveal something. And if what he's going to reveal ends up with a net, a snare, or a trap, it's not just a trap or a snare, but if somebody says, okay, pick up your toys and go home, you might gather up all your stuff, put them in a bag, and go home. So again, if we say, well, Reshit Tav means a net, snare, or a trap, or a network, or there's these other pictures. So I'm trying to instill the idea that there's different ways to read these words. But here, let's, where's that rag? The eraser. I want to show you a few things about the letter SHIN, just so you become familiar with the letter SHIN. Well, that's going to be hard to, that's going to be just as hard to see as the not writing it writes to, huh? Anyway, okay, for the letter SHIN in modern, it's basically like a U shape and has a little thing coming off the side like that. If it's pronounced as an S, there'll be a dot up here on the left. That's not right. That's left. That's not right. That's the word sin. Sin is when the dot is not right. Sin is to not be right, right? I'm showing you how to easily remember that. If you write the SHIN with the dot on the right, then that's SHIN. So it's got the SH sound. SH compared to S. That's right. So that's the, oh, thanks. So that's just a little trick of how to remember which it is. So the thing is about the S sound, the phonetic of the consonant of the S is also the psalmic. So in English, it really doesn't matter whether you pronounce an S with a C or an S. It could be both, right? Like circus, it starts with a C. So you could say, well, what's the difference? Well, in English, it's like, who knows? It just is what it is. But in Hebrew, you've got two-letter T's. You've got the tet, and you've got the tav, and you've got two-letter S's, the shin and the sin. And you could say, well, what does it matter? If nobody were to appropriate a value or a significance to the meanings of the letters, then it just doesn't matter. And we talked about this before, but for example, the Libyan leader Gaddafi, I've seen it spelled with a K and a Q and a G and who knows it however many ways, because it's just phonetic. It doesn't mean anything. And you can say, well, how does he spell his name? He doesn't use English letters. So that's not the way he spells his name. If you know what the letter SHIN means compared to a psalmic, then the word that uses that letter, it changes everything. So you could say, well, what's the difference then between a tet and a tav? Especially since the tet looks like it's a circle, which is kind of equal to the letter ayin. Sometimes the ayin is written without a dot in it. But you might say, well, it's an ayin with a tav in it, which is, you might say, the end. And if an ayin is understanding, and you could say, well, that's like the end or the no more to be done. So you could say, well, that's kind of a full understanding. But the letter tet itself means a full basket. So you can kind of read into the graphics a little bit, even with those kind of letters like that. But again, you look at this letter SHIN in modern, and it kind of has you could kind of see a flame sort of aspect. So up here, we've got the white and the black flames. I think I mentioned once before that there's a notion, especially with the modern Hebrew letters, are called flame letters. They're called the Chaldean flame letters. So you have black ink written on a parchment or on a white paper, and the black letters are like these black flames. So here in this picture, it all has to do with this bold, dynamic kingdom of heaven in these colors. And remember, the word for paint or color or dye is exactly the same as the color for fingers. So we talked about that back, I believe it was the letter Lamed, where I had the shirt with the white shirt with the colored handprint, and it was like the words that Yahweh wrote with his fingers on the tables of stone, that word finger is the same as the word colors. So this idea, though I didn't have this in mind when I did this, I just did this for playing around with the colors and making it easy to distinguish, but the whole idea of writing his words with colors, these are the very letters that his fingers used, and the finger is the same word color. See the connection? Okay, but anyway, the way that we write them, we don't really write them with colors. I mean, I do, just so it's easier to read, but we write them typically with black ink on white paper. So this idea of this working hand, the letter yod, the hey, kind of like stone motif, the expression of the yod, kind of like a respiratory tract, and hey means literally like breath. So the hey is the breath, the expression of the Creator. So the Creator, what he made in the physical universe, hey, the Torah, his expression, vav, it's kind of like the handle of the sword, the graspable part. So for him to manifest his expression as a man, as a human being, Yeshua, HaMashiach, he's the one that people grabbed hold of to apprehend, to put to death. But he's also the one we grab hold of to apprehend, to comprehend and understand the expression of Yahweh in the Torah, because he was the Torah made flesh. Flesh, Adam, man, means Alef, Dalet is vapor, Dalet Mem is blood. So Adam is literally vapor and blood, which is like breath, and the life is in the blood, and Yahweh made man and then breathed into him the breath of life. So man is like this breath of life in the blood, which is a vapor of breath in the blood, as it were. So and anyway, I'm just trying to show you these concepts behind this imagery. But then you've got the hay sort of shape See, this is the modern hay shape in the white. So again, you say, well, the white teeth is like the expression as teeth, as fire, as that which consumes. The expression of the Torah, Yod He Vav He, but then the He is also a Shin, so it's a play on kind of a double entendre, as it were. And then the ayin, the eyeball up at the top. Well, the letters Shin ayin, or Shin Vav ayin, Shua, or Shah, literally means save, help, redeem, deliver. So if you there's a few different ways to spell the word Yeshua. Sometimes people spell it as Yod Vav Shin Ayin. The phonetics is Yasha or Yosha. Or the point is that that's an acronym that means, from what I understand, may his name be stricken and forgotten. Another way might be Yod He Shin Vav He Yashua. The point is, what's the significance of Yod He Vav Shin Ayin? What's the 5 ways he's revealed himself, who he really is? The Creator, the expression of the Creator, which is the Torah, the expression of the Creator, which is the Torah made flesh so that he could be grabbed and apprehended, and then as El Shaddai, the consuming fire. Ash Akla means fire that consumes. And there's a place in the scriptures where it talks about he inhabits the praises of his people. So the lit menorah is a picture of the 2 houses of Israel. Ephraim, the northern kingdom, Yehudah, the southern kingdom, together extolling his praises by doing what he said to do, which is the white robes of righteousness, Zadikah and Mishpat, doing what he said rightly. And if the 2 houses of Israel, Ephraim, Yehudah, does what he says, he will inhabit their praises, their presence. That's the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke. He was inhabiting their presence, their neighborhood. That's the word Shekin, or Shekinah, or Shekinah, which means being neighborly in the midst of. So the picture here of him being in the midst, him the fire, being in the midst of his people on fire, like the lit menorah, is to say, what's the one thing that's not afraid to be thrown into the fire? Huh? A diamond? Is a diamond not afraid to be thrown into the fire? Wouldn't hurt it? Well, that wasn't what I was looking for. There's kind of a play on concept here. Fire, more fire, right? What does fire care about more fire? Fire, it's of like substance. So the idea is, and I think I've mentioned this before, you see there's a little graphic picture here of a guy sitting on a throne with this trident sort of a thing and a pave work in front of him and flames. We think, oh, that's the devil sitting on his throne as the king of hell. No, that's not. That's a picture of Yahweh sitting on his throne surrounded by fire. That's a picture, and there's these little notes here, Daniel 7:9, Ezekiel 1:26, and Revelation 4:3, that the Almighty has been seen sitting on a throne surrounded by fire. He's the fiery one. The devil, to rip it off and say, oh yeah, I'm going to be sitting on a throne in hell surrounded by fire with a pitchfork. Well, where do you get the pitchfork? It's like the Shin, the 3-pronged, and so for Spock to hold up his hands like this, it's a picture of the Shin. The letter Shin, meaning El Shaddai, is what's put on the mezuzahs that the observant Jewish folks puts on their doorpost. The word mezuzah means doorpost, so they stick a mezuzah on the mezuzah. And what's written inside is the Shema and the 10 Commandments and whatever else you might want to write. But my point is, that image of a guy sitting on a throne surrounded by fire holding this trident-looking thing is a picture of Yahweh, not the devil. We got these bad imagery, and so we've got the whole picture distorted. We've got the whole picture inverted, and something doesn't fit. And again, I'm saying those words as a setup to something we're going to talk about later. So he's presented himself as El Shaddai, the firing one who's the ruler of the heavens and the earth because he made them, Yod, and then Ayin, the judge. Shofet is mishpat, mem shin pei tet. Mishpat is, you might say, the place of judgment. So it's doing justice is mishpat. Doing right rulings is mishpat. But shofet is the judge himself. Shofet, you might say it's shofeton. If you had the vav nun, that might make judgment, justice, an appropriate, kind of like a noun. The point is, he calls himself the judge of all the earth. So if we think about who is this guy, Yeshua, and I tried to get into this last week with the Resh. Who is this exalted one, the high one? Why do I say he's Yeshua? The question is, whose then is Yeshua? That gets into the whole question of what does the alphabet teach? But the idea is, embodied in the word spelled Yod He Vav Shin Ayin, if you know the meanings of those letters, it tells you who he is. This is who he is. The creator, the Torah, the giver of the Torah, the expression which is the Torah, the one who became graspable as a man, the one who is El Shaddai, the consuming fire, sitting on the throne surrounded by a fire, seen by anybody who's ever had a vision of the heavenly throne room, and he's the judge of all the earth, which he made. That's who Yeshua is. Now, anybody else that might claim some of those job descriptions, it's either him or it's not him. So there was a movie that came out recently about Thor, the god of thunder, right? And he's supposed to be this big tough guy. It's like, whoever and whatever he is, if he doesn't stand for these same things, it's a ripoff. It's another disguise, like the devil sitting on a throne of fire with a pitchfork is a disguise. Like on Halloween, you dress up like the devil with a pitchfork. But the devil, like it's perpetual Halloween for him, you might say, dresses up like Yahweh. You always want to dress up like the hero, right? Why would the devil dress up like Yahweh, sitting on a throne surrounded by fire with a pitchfork? It's kind of a humorous thing. My point is, any deity with a same name or same description, but altered, isn't this guy. Yeshua, this guy, is the creator, the giver of the Torah, the expression of the Torah, the one who invented the Torah and is completely, that's his thing. He'll never change it or alter it because it was his baby. It was his plan. It was his heart expressed. So if somebody else comes up with a different Torah or a different idea or says, okay, that's been done away with, it's like, unless he pre-qualified the fact that something in the Torah could have been done away with, if somebody comes up and says, oh, he did away with it, don't believe him. It's a trick. It's not true. Therefore, that's not the real guy. So somebody asked me during the week, what's the difference between Yeshua and Jesus? Did they both live at the same time? So let me try to make it clear. I believe that Jesus Christ is a mythological fiction. When the angel showed up and talked to his mother Mary, he did not say, you shall call his name Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, the name, carries with it some baggage that was developed by Constantine and the church that he empowered in Rome to change the things of the Torah. But I believe that the angel who showed up and talked to the mother that would bear Yeshua said, you will call his name Yeshua because he will, Shin Ayin, save his people from their sins. And the one who is the Yeshua of real life is the guy who didn't change the Torah, didn't give us a different day, and to honor him, we don't delete what he said and come up with new days and new festivals. To honor him, we do what he said. We observe his day and his festivals. And so the only way to make a distinction between Jesus Christ and Yeshua HaMashiach is to say, Yeshua HaMashiach is the Torah made flesh, as our example to walk in the ways of the Torah, every word. And as a man, he didn't tell us to worship him. And in the book of Revelation, which we might get to, a couple times the angel speaking to Yochanan said, don't worship me, worship Elohim. Now the question is, who's Elohim? If you could say, well, Jesus the man is really God. If he appeared as a man, he said, don't have Elohim Achrim yoked to, al panei, yoked to my face. Well, if we from a Christian point of view says, I know that he must be the Almighty in the form of a man, so therefore I'm going to say that this is the face of God as a man, and I'm going to worship him. I think that's where it's wrong. I think we're not supposed to worship him. Now, we might know by reading the book of Revelation, we might be reading the last chapter now. Just like here, we can look at the last three and say, what's going to happen? What's this a picture of? That's a picture of him coming back. And at the time he comes back, he will have great honor and great regard. And we'll say, hail to him. But in the meanwhile, I don't believe that it's appropriate to worship his manness. We should be worshiping Yahweh, our Elohim, as he instructed us to. When they say, how should we pray? He didn't say, hey, why don't you guys just ask me? He said, this is how you pray. Our Father, Abenu, who art in Hashemayim, the heavens, Kadosh, or hallowed be your Shem. He never said, just ask me because I'm the guy, and he never did that. Now, just because he came back from the dead, walked through walls, and said, hey, look at, hey, he still didn't command worship. Now, Thomas, we're told, fell on his knees and said, my Lord and my God. But Thomas isn't my authority, nor is Thomas my example. And as the Gospels report, Yeshua there didn't smack him around and say, stop doing that. But Thomas is not my example. His word is our example. And his word in the book of Revelation said, worship Elohim. And all through the scriptures, previously he says, worship Yahweh, your Elohim. So you might say this is kind of a sticky place. And it's like, well, it'll get even stickier if we look at the book of Revelation shortly. But I'm trying to show you about this SHIN of El Shaddai. Why? We'll get into that in just a minute here. But before we get into who is El Shaddai, I want to show you a few things about the letter SHIN so that you'll understand more about the letter SHIN. Some letters, and we discussed this weeks previously, some letters work as prefixes and some as suffixes, and other letters can't be used as either. But a SHIN can be used as a prefix. So if you have the SHIN in front of a word, it might be a prefix, but it might not. So here, if you have the word El Shaddai, Alef, Lamed, SHIN, Dalet, Yod. Now, if you look in the Red Dictionary, it'll tell you that the word Alef Lamed can mean motion toward, or you might say this momentum in that direction. But it also can mean power or strength. It's translated as God also. And then you look at Shaddai, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago. If the SHIN is a prefix, then the word die means enough or sufficiently or stop. So it could be read as the Elohim, the El, who stops, who says, that's it, it's the end. Who's El Shaddai? The one with the teeth that says, that's it, I'm chewing this place up, it's over. Tav, the Aleph, beginning of Mem, the world, is now done. It's over. I'm calling it shop. I'm calling it quits. I'm the guy that started it, I'm the guy that turned it off. El Shaddai is the El, the power, the one who has the power to say, it's over. So the fiery teeth coming like a flaming arrow to impact the earth, one way to, there's a number of different ways to read this image, I'm just trying to go over a few of them here, is, so here's, like I said, Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, if you read the white as a Hey, but if you read the white as, the black as a SHIN, then it's Yod, Hey, Vav, SHIN, Ayin. There's 49 Yod, Hey, Vav, Heys. The 50th one is like counting Shavuot or counting the Yovel, the Jubilee. The 50th one says, this is the day of our rejoicing. This is the day of the harvest in the spring, the first harvest. This is the day of the Yovel when all the debts are paid and everything goes back to the original owners of the land. And this is our day of, or our year of saying, this is the release. It's the fulfillment of being saved, redeemed, and delivered. I mentioned this guy, I think it was last week, the Rabbi Simcha Perlmutter, who's on the internet. He's deceased, but he was an Orthodox rabbi of a sort. There's different sorts. But anyway, he was living in the Judean wilderness for 30 years, and he says, we know the name of the Messiah. It's in all the writings. Because in Hebrew, the names mean things. Like, for example, it says, Yahweh says, Caleb honors me with all his heart. Well, the interesting thing, the word Caleb means all heart. It's Kaf Lamed Bet. Kaf Lamed means all, Lamed Bet means heart. But the word Caleb itself is the word for dog, and a dog is one who has all heart. And so you could sit there and just look at a simple word like Caleb and see the way Hebrew works. How does the word Yeshua work? Yahweh's salvation. When you say Hosha, you're saying save us, help us. Na, Nun Alef, means please. So there's a song I remember hearing in Christian church, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Well, it's almost sang like it's singing praise to him. But it's really saying, please help us, save us, deliver us. Hoshana means help us. But see, because we don't know what it means, and we just pick up a little Hebrew phrase here and there, and we twist it around, and it becomes something which isn't what it means at all, but yet the expression of the heart is there. If you don't know any words to say, and you say, look, I have to express my words, well, there's this concept of speaking in tongues where you're saying unintelligible things anyway. So if you're saying unintelligible and saying Hosanna in the highest, thinking that you're exalting him, you're probably exalting him. And I'm not saying you're not. But the benefit of understanding Hebrew is to use his words as he gave them to us with meaningful intent. And you could say, well, who cares? Well, look, you can have a little baby and he can say goo goo gaga till he's 14 years old. And you could say, well, I appreciate his heart, but there's something about learning the articulation of language which has to do with just progressing and developing. And it's not to put anything down, but it's a matter of saying, why do we do what we do? Why are we studying language? Why is he called the Word? Why is he referred to as the Word made flesh? Why does it say in the New Testament that he chose the foolishness of preaching to be the vehicle by which his seed, the Word, would be spread and propagated? Because he determined that words will be the highest of importance on the face of the earth in reference to him. He determined that it was all about words. That's why we're studying these words, so that we can do it to honor him, to give thanks to him, to speak with him on his terms, and to understand what he was trying to say when he was speaking to us on our terms, which is the way he created our mind as a conscious computing machine that could hear, process, categorize, and respond with words. So I believe that in spite of our intention, words are critical. And even in the Gospel of John, it says, I think we discussed this once before. I will address it again because it's a little bit confusing. First chapter of John. In the beginning was the Word. Which word? Anybody have any idea which word he's talking about? I remember reading a book once, and they said, well, in Greek, there's this concept of the logos. And it's this kind of this ethereal, it's kind of similar to the Hindu sort of notion of Om, which is like this droning hum of the universe. Well, the logos is kind of like that kind of a thing. So here, the only way to invoke the understanding of this word, in the beginning was the Word, is to invoke either this Greek thing or this Hindu thing. Because why? Because we don't have a Hebraic context. But Yahweh didn't use either of these other two cultural references because he invented Hebrew. So what word in the beginning was the word? What word was in the beginning? Anybody got an idea? Huh? I can't distinguish anybody's word, sorry.
Aleph through the top.
The Alef through the top. So part of the purpose of this class is to present the hypothesis that the word that was in the beginning, the word, happens to be spelled, it's one word, it happens to be spelled with 22 different letters. One letter used each time, right? If you use English words, sometimes the letter is repeated more than once. And the one word spelled with 22 different letters happens to be Abagada Havaza Fadi Ikalama Nasa Fats Karashta. That's the word that was with Elohim and was Elohim. How can I say that this word was Elohim? Because Elohim, the Creator, made this and decided to present himself as it to us. Everything those letters mean, and everything incorporated within that word, which is all what's inside the red dictionary, is everything he decided to tell us and explain us about himself. His thoughts, his intentions, his hopes and dreams, his fears or his apprehensions or the things that disgust him and that he doesn't like. When I say his fear, what did he fear? What? He feared that Israel would turn away and walk away? When I say the word fear, it wasn't like he was scared, but he was disgusted and upset. And he didn't want it to happen, but he knew it was going to happen. But what I'm saying is all these concepts are embedded in this word. So if this is the word that Yahweh presented saying, this is me, I'm the guy that's embedded and coded in these 22 letters. I'm that guy. Then that is the word that was made flesh, that was with Elohim, and that was Elohim. Now, Elohim as Ein Sof, the unlimited one, means that he's not limited to these 22 letters. But for us, on the face of the earth, during this age of this present darkness, these are the 22 letters by which we reference who he is. After this, QOOF, when Resh comes back and we see his face and all things are made new, he's liable to completely blow open the boundaries of our apprehension of him to unfathomable dimensions that we can not even dream about right now. He even says so, that when he comes back, no mind has been able to conceive, nor eye has seen, nor heart imagined the things that he has stored up, waiting for those who have chosen to regard his words. If you read in the book of Revelation, it talks about 3 different places. It talks about those who keep the commandments of Elohim and the testimony of Yeshua. Another place, another translation says the belief of Yeshua. So the question is this: what's the testimony of Yeshua? One way to render that verse is to say, okay, if I tell you the story of Jesus, if I tell you the gospel, if I tell you the belief that he died and rose from the dead and went and ascended into heaven, he's coming back and he's the Lord on high, that's my testimony about Jesus. That's what the book of Revelation is talking about. That's one way to read it. But it's like saying this: does this mean the one who stops? But if you take this away and says this is the suffix, then Shad is a female breast. It's also a demon. It's also someone who devastates and destroys. And this is saying my. And it's like, which way do you read this? El Shaddai is I am the one who provides, sustains, nourishes, and also destroys, annihilates, and causes things to be ripped down to an empty field of nothingness, because the word Shaddai also means an empty field. So you could say, what's the testimony of Yeshua? I'm trying to play these two things off each other. The testimony of Yeshua is the testimony which Yeshua himself spoke out of his mouth. That's the testimony of Yeshua. It's not my testimony about him, but if I keep the same testimony that was Yeshua's testimony, Yeshua's witness, what would it look like? it would look like pure Torah. Yeshua, being the Torah made flesh, could not break a single commandment, or else he wouldn't be faultless. He wouldn't be sinless. He wouldn't be guiltless. He could not be any kind of a sacrifice, nor would his Father have said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Listen to him. Listen to him. Yes, regard his words. If Yeshua himself didn't keep the Torah, he wouldn't be worth listening to or following. So what's the testimony of Yeshua? The Torah. What was the belief of Yeshua? Yeshua's personal belief was we should worship Elohim, we should walk in his ways, we should love him and fear him and trust him unto eternity. That was the belief of Yeshua. So in the book of Revelation it says, these are those, Yahweh said he will spare the coming wrath to these who keep the testimony of Yeshua and keep the commandments. Keeping the commandments is the testimony of Yeshua. But if you think of it as saying, oh no, I'm just going to say I believe in him, we might have missed it. And remember, the scariest verse in the Bible, Yeshua says, there will come on Judgment Day, on the day of the great harvest, people will be separated in two camps. And he says, these be dismissed unto the flames of eternity, to be burned up. And they're going to say, hey, what are you doing? Lord, we did stuff in your name. We cast out demons and we healed people. And he says, I never knew you, you workers of iniquity. Well, we don't have the New Testament in Hebrew, but in Greek the word anomio means lawlessness. And again, he wasn't talking about civil law. He was talking about the Torah, Elohim's Chok, Het, Kuf, commandments, which is everything within the big white fence covered over by the Kuf, the pillar of fire, as the pillar of smoke is the dome over the top of the treasure box. Het, Kuf is the word Chok, which is translated as commandments. But remember, it's everything in there. Depart from me, you workers of anything but what I told you to do. So why do we keep Shabbat and the festivals? Because he told us to. Why do we study the Hebrew? Because in the languages which are not Hebrew, the keepers of the books, which are the clerks, the clerics, and the clergy, have told us that they know how to read the books. They've scrutinized them thoroughly, and they told us, guess what, folks? You don't have to keep these instructions. They were done away with. But surprise, when you read Hebrew, you come back and you realize, oh no, they weren't done away with. We do have to keep them, because Yahweh said it's the sign of the covenant that you are mine and that I am yours. And if you are mine and that I am yours, when I come back, I will gather you up, Resh Shin Tav, take what's mine, and off into the great by and by, whether it's on the face of the earth or whether it's in the eternal dimensions. That remains to be seen. It really doesn't matter. But the point is, all this is really about what is the testimony of Yeshua? Who is El Shaddai? We've got about 4 minutes left. So I'm going to tell you a couple things about the letter Shin as a prefix. I'm not going to read all this stuff. You guys can do it yourself. If you look in the dictionary, what does Shin Alef mean? Wonder, amazed, empty of thought. Shin Bet, old man, one whose penitent returns. Shin Gimel, mislead, astray, err, stagger, or unintentionally going astray. Remember, Gimmel's letter goes back and forth. Shin Dalet, violence, havoc, a devil, dispenser. Shin Hey, a lamb. Shin Vav, equality. Shin Zion, having to do with the remnant saved to reseed with. Shin Het, meditation, talk, or amusing, or looking down. And so it's also swimming because you're looking down. My point is, you can go through all these, and the letter Shin can be read as a prefix, telling you, in a sense, what the other letters mean. When you add the letter to the Shin, and then you say, well, if the Shin can be read kind of as a prefix saying who, that which does these things, it'll give you the idea of what those other letters do, when you add them to a Shin. And then you can look at Shin Vav Aleph, Shin Vav Bet, Shin Vav Gimel, Shin Vav Dalet. And, this took quite a bit of time, but I went through and did this whole study trying to see if I could get a taste for the progression of this ball rolling through the alphabet, you might say. When you do film animation, you take frame by frame a sequence of movements. If somebody is going to jump, here's one frame, here's another frame, and here's another frame, and here's another frame, and there's another frame, and there's another frame, and then you put them all together real fast, like in a little flip book, and what you see is... So the question is, what if you could read the alphabet like a flip book, like an animated message? If you can get your mind to sit here and go, what is this alefness, betness, gimmelness? And if you're going to go, that's the concept. That's the word. That's the word that was Elohim, that was with Elohim, that was made flesh to come to dwell among us, to lead us back to Him, so that we could be in union with Him unto eternity. That's Yeshua. The walking, the animation of the letters, Alef through Tav, walking it out. So you have the picture as a whole, walking it out, but then you have He Himself coming here, Alef, bedding, coming into incorporated matter, Gimel as the voyager to Dalet the earth, Hey revealed as Vav, the man slain Zion, Het entombed, Tet, the stone rolled in front of it. But also it can be read as the kingdom of heaven. Here's the authorized signatory, the Tet of the Het. We've gone through this before. It's time to take a break on this, but when we come back, let me just say this. I printed these up so everybody can come up and get one. There's about 110 words in Hebrew here. 22 rows, keyed to the same colors as here. All of these are names of Yahweh. This is Yahweh's Shem. Aya, Asher, Aya, El Elyon, Anoki, El Shaddai, Kadosh, Emmanuel, Shalachon, Achad, Amet, Amen, Or, Ani Yahweh's Elohim Zavot, so forth and so on. We'll go through what these mean. So with this is also what each one of the words means in English and the people that speak Hebrew here might consider this kind of a butchery of the phonetics, but I did it pretty fast and as pretty quick as I can, so at least it's better than nothing. And here is how you might say the words, transliterated. Eye Asher Eye El Elyon, Anki El Shaddai, Kadosh Emmanuel, Shelchon, Achad, Aman, Amet, Aor, Aniyah. See? So everybody can come up and take one of these. So it's one of these stapled. There's 3 pages here, and plus this. And the idea is, this is who El Shaddai is. This is who Yahweh is. This is who Yeshua is. Yeshua came to save us so that we could, instead of being launched into the ejection seat of banishment from the kingdom, we could be brought back into favor and relationship, just like the picture of the prodigal son story, where the prodigal son, when he came to his senses and says, what am I doing here? Why, I'd love to eat the food of a pig. The word pig in Hebrew means one who returns. And he says, why don't I be eating the food of one who returns? Why don't I go back home to my father's house and eat the food at his banqueting table? So he got up and he came back, and before he's even back home yet, his father, who had been watching for him, ran to meet him, greeted him, kissed him, gave him clothes, put the ring back on his finger, and said, I've been anticipating this day. Yeshua is the one who has allowed us to come back. This is who he is. This is the Resh. This is the SHIN. This is our shining Elyon, Yahweh El Shaddai. So we'll get into this a bit more upon the break. But feel free to come up and get these.